President at the Centre for Domestic Economy Policy Research. Thank you very much, Dr. Bhattacharya, for being here with us. This really could be seen as a U-turn given the level of escalation in a trade war that has hit the economy and hit both countries as well. Do you think that these comments from Trump are just rhetoric, or is this a real shift in US-China trade relations?
As I mentioned, in this broadcast earlier also, is that, look, US is a democracy and voices will be heard very clearly. So both the US economy and the Chinese economy are under tremendous pressure. But as a political entity, the US administration will be under a much higher pressure because it's open to scrutiny and it's open to voices from within the US economy, including the industries and so on and so forth. The US automobile industry has almost come down to its knees because of the freeze on export of rare earth magnets from US and from China, and that entire amount is just $70 million. So choking $70 million of supply from China to US has brought down the US down to its knees. And clearly there are several repercussions to that. Automobiles is one of the largest employers in US. It contributes to about 20% of the GDP, given that it consumes enormous amount of metal and wires and so on and so forth. So clearly the pressure on the US administration was far more than the pressure on the Chinese administration, although both the economies were suffering. And so, yes, there seems to be a U-turn from the US side. And clearly it was US which reached out to the Chinese administration. So from the facts that seems to be on the table, there is a U-turn from the US administration side.
Yes, Dr. Bhattacharya, after that meeting in Geneva where we saw triple-digit tariffs on some goods drop down to just double-digit, there were accusations of breaches of that deal made in Geneva. Do you think that will have any impact on conversations that will take place next week in London?
There will be, because, if you look at historically, China does not seem to be upholding its international commitments, and that has been repetitively done. If you look at what happened in the last 3 months, in early April, China choked on rare earth metals along with everything else and rare earth magnets. And one of the reasons the US government reached out to China on 12th of May was on a quid pro quo basis that they will remove this choke on rare earth magnets. And China did remove it by 16th of May and then promptly put it back in a few days. So clearly they reneged on what they had committed to the US government, and therefore the US government is quite wary and circumspect of what the Chinese are committing to and what they actually do. And since a lot of it is not really written in a piece of paper, a lot of it is verbal commitments, verbal quid pro quo. So I think what will unravel in the UK conversations between the US administration and the Chinese administration is, I think, a bit more concrete, bit more conversation laden with suspicion. So it'll be interesting to see what is the outcome of that discussion.
Yes, absolutely. We know that the United States and Donald Trump reached out to China. We know that Trump, of course, has said multiple times that these Liberation Day tariffs and reciprocal tariffs have been a tool to get nations that they trade with to come to the negotiating table. But given Trump's stance on trade, is this an admission of defeat by Trump, or is this just the art of the deal at play?
To begin with, the US was putting about 2 to 3% tariff on goods being imported into US, and that's been reset to 10%. The point is that reset could have been done straight away and nations would have probably agreed to it, because 10% is more palatable than a complete disruption for last 3 months. Almost a quarter went away in the trade disruption. That's 1/4 of the year gone. And clearly that's a huge impact in terms of GDPs, in terms of productivity. See, if you look at just US and China together, because that was where the most amount of disruption happened, they constitute about 40% of the global GDP. The trade between them is about $600 billion. That's a huge amount of disruption that happened, which has had repercussions all over the world. China started dumping those goods elsewhere, including into India, and therefore Indian industry started suffering. So clearly, this was not the right way of doing a negotiation, which is so sensitive. If one wants to change the overall ship and one wants to abandon WTO, because clearly none of this falls under the WTO regime, then one should have stated that upfront and had discussions to that effect. And maybe in 6 months to 7 months, the same objective could have been achieved without the amount of disruption that happened in the last so many months.
Yes, and Dr. Bhattacharya, building on that disruption that you've mentioned, what will be the real life impacts for people and businesses in both China and the US if this tariff and trade war can be resolved? How will it impact the everyday person?
You know, if you look at the US government website on trade, from February onwards, till February, the trade with China was growing, and then it just started falling off like a bottomless pit, and it's continuing to fall. And what does that mean is that there will be less number of manufacturing happening, and I'm only talking about goods because there are other repercussions. There is repercussion in terms of money flow into US because of students getting into US. There's repercussions in terms of investments going into US, in terms of real estate being purchased in US with foreign money and so on and so forth. So I'm not even talking about those flows. I'm just talking about the trade, the goods trade. There has been significant drop in the merchandise export. So therefore, that many number of jobs would have got reduced in US. And similarly, that many number of jobs would have got reduced in China. More importantly, it would lead to stressed assets on both sides. What that really means is that the corporations would have taken loans or would have taken some form of capital, and they will not be in a position to return it. And typically, it will be MSMEs who are getting hit, the small and medium enterprises who are getting hit. And therefore, once they go belly up, and they can go belly up very, very quickly because their capacity to withstand such disruptions is very limited. And once they go belly up, that capacity is gone. That ability to generate jobs is gone forever. And that really is the problem and the pain that we face on both sides in US and in China.
Dr. Jayjat Bhattacharya, thank you ever so much for providing your expertise and insight. All eyes will be on that meeting in London early next week, and we, of course, will bring you all of those updates. We move on now, but we stay with China-North American relations. Canadian Prime Minister Mark